Hello, and welcome to Coding Coens. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can, go ahead and say something in the chat. I'm watching it. This is the show where we talk about software and the people who write software and how you also can write software, or if you're someone who already knows how to write software, where you can share what you know and what you love. That's pretty much what we're going to be doing. We're going to be pair programming on software. Today with me is Sarah Sunday. I'm going to switch to gallery view now.
Hello.
Hey, Sarah. Just so everyone knows, Sarah Sunday is an experienced software consultant with a variety of esoteric coding and website projects. Beyond that, she's a science fiction and fantasy writer, a food reviewer, and an antique book collector. So, Sarah, welcome.
Hi.
Woo! Looks like we are being heard, which is fantastic. This is awesome. This is a monumental achievement. Sound is so important. Sarah, how do we know each other?
Well, we worked together at 8thLight for a time period that I can no longer recall the duration of, but it was many months.
Yeah, that's right. We were working. Sarah was my, I guess, you were a team lead, weren't you, at that time?
Yeah, I think it's my best description.
Right, yeah. I have to say, Sarah is one of the best bug finders I have ever seen. I don't know how she keeps all of it in her head and how she manages to move through the code base to find those things that no one else can find, but she always does, especially in what seems like really, really old code. Sarah, what's your passion when it comes to software?
I just say getting things done, whether it be fixing a bug, finding it, getting that fixed, or just getting a feature done. Seeing it all wrapped up nicely and complete, moving that card to the done column.
Doesn't it feel frustrating though? I mean, you're spending a lot of time trying to get something that should be already done to work, you could spend a long time trying to do that. How do you manage the frustration of doing that?
I imagine myself as like Sisyphus, or like pushing the boulder up and down, up and down. I mean, it's always going to be an uphill battle because you get one thing, there's always going to be another thing. Mm-hmm. Nothing is ever really going to be done fully. There's nothing 100% complete, never going to touch an application. Maybe such things exist, but they are truly the unicorns of this world.
Yeah, that does sound a lot like some of our audience might know about art. And it's said that a novel or a piece of art is never complete. Would you say the same about software then?
Yes, 100%. And software could be considered art as well.
Yeah. Speaking of art, I'm loving your background right now. Is that a penguin I see back there?
Yes. He is guarding the back lamp that if we touch it, all of the lighting is doomed.
Okay. Yes. So he's a proud defender or an avenger of that night lamp.
Oh, if you do Avenger, then we have to look at the posters too.
Yeah, that's true. We've got some good posters going on there. I'm not sure if you can tell, but there are a number of people on this channel who really like geek stuff. So I remember you did once a video talking about Git, and you used reorganizing all the episodes in Clone Wars into chronological order according to when they should have happened in universe, right?
Yes. That was an interesting exercise. There's like a guide for it. It is one of the most convoluted orderings. Star Wars, that's always convoluted.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We're working on a project with React and TypeScript this time, correct?
Yes.
So why don't you, before we go into that, let's talk about what is TypeScript?
What is TypeScript? It's JavaScript with types is probably the most basic answer.
Okay, so what's JavaScript? Yeah.
JavaScript, a language to modify the front end, like a web page.
Okay.
But you can also use it as a back end now.
So TypeScript is a programming language that's written on top of another programming language, right?
Yeah, basically providing, like, you could call it like just providing typing on top of it. It's going
Okay.
to compile down. At the end of the day, it's going to be JavaScript.
Okay, cool. So it ends up being JavaScript, but you don't really care about that. You work with the TypeScript above it so that you can operate the JavaScript a little nicer. So why would someone want to use TypeScript as opposed to just going right at the JavaScript instead?
Yeah, so the arguments for TypeScript are basically the arguments for typing in general. Um, if you have types, you can have what we call type safety. So your expectation, it's going to check if your expectation for the function is returning is actually what it will be returning. Like, do these arguments and pieces in your function actually turn into like a number, or are they actually turning into, I don't know, not like null or a string?
Okay,
So to prevent like bugs in your application, and also make it easier just to catch issues that may come up.
cool. Yeah, and then React is a framework. So that's built on top of JavaScript traditionally, but now we're going to use TypeScript with it.
Yeah, React is its own whole world. I think technically it's a library, but we always call it framework. It's very blurry in the JavaScript world.
But it's built on top of JavaScript, and it's basically some code that makes it easier for you to write the raw stuff and manage that, basically, right?
Yeah, making your user interfaces makes it really easy to make your web pages look nice and interact smoothly.
Well, certainly easier than if you were to write it purely in JavaScript, and easier to keep track of the changes too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, have we spent enough time yet? I think we have. Why don't you share your screen and we'll start pair programming?
Yes. Zoom. Okay, the sharing.
So I guess the first thing we're going to need to do is walk through the project that you have created, and you've created a sexuality calculator in TypeScript, and then also in. Let me just make sure that I'm getting both of our videos here. There we go. There you are. So it's a sexuality calculator that you're creating. This is an open source project. This is something that you're just doing on your own. Is that right?
Yeah, it's on my GitHub profile. It's a public repo. I probably need to attach the correct license to it still. But yeah, open source for sure.
Okay, cool. And for those of you who don't know, open source is where anyone at all can view the source code and look at exactly what it is and read through it themselves. You could, in fact, go to GitHub and see Sarah Sunday's actual source code, and here it is. You can actually see the URL there, I think, as well, if you wanted to go along with it. But yeah, if you wanted to dive into it, you could. At first it might not make very much sense, but if Sarah wrote her code very well, then you should be able to actually get into it a little bit easier. So walk us through what the sexuality calculator is and why you decided to build it.
Yeah. So sexuality calculator is kind of to fill a niche where I was noticing a lot of like basic sexuality quizzes that I feel like really just boiled down to gay, heterosexual, bisexual, which is very limiting, problematic, and not all inclusive. So main just like goal was to really get into all of the asexual spectrum and some of the more the gray sexualities, have a way to like kind of be inclusive of that. And it was like an interesting like thought experiment to how do you break down that logic, because there's a lot of like potential overlap. Like how do you model that as a calculator / quiz?
Cool. So basically it'll go through this and not just give you what maybe marketers might care about as far as sexuality, but actually try to determine all of the sexualities that can exist. And it's quite a spectrum. I saw in your code, actually, you had like a whole list of them. You want to show those?
Yeah. So I have what we call an enum of all the sexualities that I have loaded into the application at this time. So you can just see it's like a list, so that it's a string enum. So the left side is an easy way to reference it, and the right side is like the string value that is actually, what the value of this, enum key pair kind of relationship is. for example, like, lithosexual or
I've
koi, akio. That
I
I
don't
think
know if
akio's something
I'm one
else.
of those, actually. I have no idea. I don't know what those even are.
I've spent a lot of time like looking at it, and I've forgotten it, so we'll discover together.
Yeah, yeah, let's
As
do
we
that.
dig into it.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, this is great. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, cool. So this is basically, so the purpose of this is just because of the fact that you know about programming, you decide to just do this on your own. You're not getting paid for it. This is just for fun, or maybe for, just because you felt like it was the right thing to do, which is
Yeah.
great. But like, let's say that someone else in the audience might want to try and do something like this too, and they're just realizing that, yeah, maybe they can do this. How would they get started? Or how did you get started more appropriately?
Yeah. So I came to this idea, and I knew I wanted to be, a React, nice, easy, clickable, like kind of calculator concept, like questions, answers, like really simple interface. Um, I've used React a great deal for user interfaces, so I knew I wanted to be React. But I also want to make had some of these pages are going to be static, like we're going to have like just like an informational page.
Hmm.
So then the next step was trying to figure out how am I going to build this. Now I'm going to use React, but how am I going to approach the React?
Okay, cool.
I did some research and found this tool called React Static,
Okay.
um, which is a static site generator for React. I'm still learning about it. Still, some of it is still mysteries of its power, but basically an easy way to generate like simple static React sites, because this calculator isn't pulling any data from like an API.
Uh-huh.
It's just a bunch of code. It's just a JavaScript and HTML and some styling. I just tried this little generator on top of React out. And it's gone, it was pretty easy to get started with like just creating it. I did add on some bells and whistles to it. That's not like the normal setup, such as TypeScript and also styled components,
Right.
which is a whole world of its own.
Styled
Uh,
components. That is where each component gets its own CSS styling. Is that right?
yes. And I've learned recently is a thing called CSS modules that feels like styled components, or what styled components is
Okay,
essentially is.
for the basics, CSS is what makes things on a page look a certain way. The JavaScript, or the TypeScript in this case, is sort of like if I might describe this, and let me know if I get this analogy a little bit wrong. If a web page is an animal, it has bones, and the bones are something called HTML. And then it has skin, which is like your CSS, and then you have muscles, which are the JavaScript, which allow it to do different things. That being said, sometimes the skin is also a muscle, and sometimes the bone is not really a bone. Is that right?
Uh, Nothing is ever certain, but I think the analogy is pretty good.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Everything can be in JavaScript.
Everything could be in JavaScript. Yes, yeah, and in fact, there are people who work with JavaScript who would really like for everything to be in JavaScript. I know people who want everything to be in Swift. So, okay, so we've got styled components. Components, so that you know what a component is. It is a part of a page. Like, for instance, that reset button is probably a component, right?
Yeah, I actually have a components directory, and we have a button component here. So the button component is just styling creating a button HTML element and styling it with the particular colors I want.
In this case, dark green, I'm seeing, or dark blue.
Yeah, dark green. Got some blue here.
Yeah.
If we go submit, let's fill out everything. We'll get a submit button, which is this green button that goes dark green on hover.
Yeah.
And then resets the secondary button, which is blues.
Blue or dark blue, yeah. And you named it blue and dark blue. Those values are probably under the hood. You're using hex codes for those, right?
Yes. So also have an enum for colors, a string enum. So left side's, what we humans would call these colors, and the right side's the hex values,
Yes.
which we feed to CSS to um, make our things look pretty and nice and colored.
So the computer reads what's on the left or what's on the right-hand side, right? And the left-hand side is what we name that thing, so that it's easy for us to remember what it is that we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As shorthand, so we don't have to copy and paste this seemingly arbitrary hex code string of digits.
Yeah, and have to
You don't need to
remember what that
this
is.
purple.
Yeah, or get it slightly wrong. Like sometimes it's 9214F FB instead of FF, which would make a slightly different shade of red, right?
Yeah, it would be
It
one value tweak would be turned something completely different. I want to like test and see what happens if we change something.
right, and if you do change it, if you change it in that one place, it'll change it everywhere, not just in one place where you have to go through the code and find every single place where you've written something and make sure that it's different, right?
Yeah, it'd be global changes since we're sharing the same blue value around. Now it's purple, not blue. It's purple.
Oh,
They
cool.
changed that 0 to a 5. I actually kind of like that purple, but
Huh.
the blue has, I think, better contrast.
Yeah, that's something else. That, are you when you're picking these colors? Are you picking them also based off of accessibility, like for people who are colorblind or can't see all the entire color spectrum?
Yeah, I tried to make sure I was doing like color contrast checks on these blues and purples and greens. I'm pretty sure I went through all of them. I might need to do a double check, but the color contrast was good. Like the white foreground, and the blue as a background checked out on the accessibilities
Cool.
requirements.
Yeah.
At least should have.
Yeah, it's just another thing you have to think about when you're writing code, or like, are you going to make this so that everyone can access it, not just someone like yourself? Yeah. Very cool. So we had some stuff that we wanted to try and pair program on in this, or some improvements we wanted to make to the code, right?
Yeah, there are a few little issues and bigger things we can tackle with this little mini calculator app.
All right, well, what do you want to do? We could either do something where we actually change something that's a feature that will look flashy and awesome, or we could walk through, some sort of code cleanup thing where everyone would get to see the Git flow.
I was thinking starting to involve with styling since we were on the styling subject.
Okay, cool.
So if we go into like a more of a mobile screen, we do know, or like a tiny screen size with maybe a large font, we do begin to notice some issues with how the kind of site is,
Yeah,
like
I
how
see that.
responsive it is, or lack thereof.
Right.
So the text is overflowing outside of the nice box I made for it. Is refusing to stay inside, or the box is not growing. So
Yeah.
we have to figure out why or how to fix this. Do we want to
Okay.
make the box bigger? Do we want to make text cut off?
I don't think cutting off makes any sense in this case because you still want to
No.
be able to read what that is, because some T does not mean the same thing as sometimes.
Yeah. So we definitely want to make the box bigger. So if you can see the elements, we have our styles here. This random letters
Hold on a
corresponds to.
Before we continue with this, what are you using right now on this browser? Is this is Chrome, right?
This is Safari.
This is
developer tool.
Safari. You're using Safari's developer tools on here.
I know, I'm a masochist.
Oh my God! Why would you do that to yourself?
Because
Okay.
I like.
All right, so we're using the Safari web browser, and all web browsers have some developer tools that come along with them. Could you walk through what you did to inspect this to get to this page right here? Because you can do this with any web page, right?
Yeah. With Safari, you might need to go into your preferences under advanced, say like show develop in the menu bar.
Mm-hmm.
You have to click that checkbox. But on other browsers, you might just be able to right click and hit inspect element, which will pop up this sidebar and show you the element on the web page.
And it'll show you
And
like
have that color.
it won't show you the source code, but it will show you what the browser is reading right now, right?
Yeah, the end result, what you're seeing on this page. So like the HTML, like this, each piece of the page, and the styling, the CSS on it.
Yeah. The JavaScripts might be a little harder to get into, but there are tools for that as well, right?
Yes, there's ways to like try to figure out what's going on, what JavaScript's working, and to dig into it. But
yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's go through and try and figure out what this element is. We have div.sc-ax, which I'm guessing that somehow that's been generated because there's no way that you named that.
Yeah, that's the styled components makes like random strings for class names, so you don't name them. It's all kind of, I think, unique to that component.
Okay, and the SC at the front of it means styled component, and that lets you know that styled components generated this, right?
That would be probably my guess too. I haven't looked into the docs over the class names, but we can override them to like human readable names.
Okay.
That is a possibility too.
Yeah. All right, so we're looking at this class right here that is, we believe, is wrapping our sometimes. And
yeah,
now we're going to try to mess with the CSS in the browser, which is not going to change our source code, but it's just going to give us a way to experiment with what might work when we change our source code. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So way to like preview styling changes. You can do this like on any web page. You can just mess with the styling with the developer tools. Just maybe make the font's color red or whatever.
Well, you won't break everyone else's web pages when you do that, right?
It's just on your own machine. You can break it just for yourself.
And then if you hit the refresh button, it'll all go back to normal.
Yeah, it all clears out and goes, returns back to its intended state.
Okay, cool. I want to give people the ability to go and just mess with stuff. So that's cool. All right, so let's go ahead and mess with some stuff.
Yeah, so on this component, we have a few things going on here. So we have this padding. We have some flex and border. So let's look at the border first. The border is border. It's what provides that nice purple box around it.
Well, that actually is one way to fix the box problem, is just don't have a border.
Yeah, but it doesn't look as nice then.
Okay.
I kind of like the box.
Yeah, let's keep the box.
I guess it's more minimalist, I guess.
It is.
Now we have slight, you might not be able to see it, but slight curved edges on it. They make it nice and soft.
Oh my goodness. Can you make the screen a little larger so we can see how curved that edge is? Or actually, better yet, maybe we can just make it an extreme, change the border radius here an extreme so that we can see it like turn into a circle or something.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, that's nice in like early 2000s border radius is going on there.
Yeah, so you can increase it. I would just wave it a slight curve, just a slight.
Yeah.
The minimalist was probably a solution, but looks too much white space.
Okay, that's fair.
Too much on the eyes. Yeah. The other thing, this is being overwritten elsewhere, but we also have this margin. Without the margin, things are hitting each other.
Yeah.
Bleeding in. It's actually doing this on the up and down, like the vertical.
Yeah, it is.
So we'll have to look into that too. But then we go up here. We do have the padding that is being overridden. So padding just reducing it a little bit, making it a little bit more condensed on mobile.
So the padding is overriding. Why do we have the padding being written twice and then sometimes it's just not being used and other times it is? Why is it built that way?
Mobile responsiveness. So we don't want things to always look the same on desktop as they do on mobile. So we use media queries determine like max width 800px. So when it's lower than that, it's going to be using this. So I have a really tiny screen. So if I go back up to a bigger screen size, whenever that hits, it will change the styling potentially. Cool. If I have a scaling of this. Yeah, so it's not doing those overrides anymore.
Okay. So that means that like basically what's going on here is that the media query sort of goes like, hey, is the screen size less than 800? Okay, don't use those, use these instead. Right?
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, whoa, what'd you just do there? That worked.
Yeah, so I had this max width on it, so we didn't have like giant boxes, but that's what we want. So we probably want to get rid of this max width. So max width is basically saying this is not gonna go beyond 33% of the container.
And that's when it's this small, so that way that when we scale it up again back to a regular web page, it's not going to look weird, right?
Yeah. So when we go back up outside of like the collapses back into this nice kind of organized point. Actually, this will at the max width still used at this point. Now it snaps back. Mm-hmm. We probably don't want the max width at all anymore. However, there's still an issue we have to work out is that bleeding of the border. So you probably want something like some margin around both the top and bottom.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, the space drain.
Yeah, that looks nicer.
Yeah. So as you said, if we refresh the page, this all goes away. So I'm refreshing it. Oh, it goes back to normal.
Okay. Perfect.
So we need to actually make the changes in the code base.
Okay, so we have to remember what those are now. We have to we got to change the max width and just delete the max width when we're at media under 800 pix, or right?
Yeah. So getting rid of the max width.
Okay.
The max width is gone.
Okay.
But we also added that little margin.
Yeah.
I think we used 20.25 EMs.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So now it looks good again.
Okay. Cool. Well, that is a change to the code, and we want to try and capture that and make sure that other people who are using the code as well or developing alongside you might be able to get that latest thing as well and not accidentally code on top of you, right? So we're going to use a tool called Git. And Git is version control software. It is an absolute staple of software development. So if you are interested in learning about software, learn about Git because you're going to be using it a lot. We did git status, and that told us that there's a modified thing inside of our file that's in the radio question.tsx. Right? We're going to git add-p, which is awesome. I love git add-p because you get to see the exact changes that you just made and review them before you go on from there. So we got rid of max width 30, that's in red and it has a minus sign, and we got onto margin 0.25 EM, and that has been added. And do we want this? Yes. And we're going to stage this hunk, as it is said. That's the only place I've ever seen stage this hunk, by the way. I don't even know exactly what hunk means. I'm wondering if Git is just complimenting my code by calling it a hunk.
Like it's missing C is like a chunk makes more sense, but
no, that would make me feel like my code is but that's kind of we don't want to body shame our code, so
that's true.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so these changes now have been staged and they're ready to be committed. So now we have to actually commit the changes.
And commit means commit it to memory. Like it's actually going to remember that this is a thing that happened in the code base. And it's creating a history of what changes happened and when, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to commit this as fix radio button, radio question, mobile styling.
And you put a design thing at the front of that to let, so that when you go back through the commit history, you'll see that, oh, this is a design issue, not some other kind of issue. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's just a quick reference of like where the change was made. Just kind of allows you to kind of also, if you realize there's like so many things going on, you might want to break out those commits out. So if someone needs to like go back in the history or revert something or try to figure out when this thing happened, they can actually use the commit messages to help them know like the order of operations that led to this point.
Very cool. Okay, so should be able to just do that. And then if we do a git log, which is going to show us all the commits that we've done, starting from the most recent to the top and then going back through history downward, we can see our design fix radio question mobile styling. And then a merging of a pull request and add basic linter info and some other things of that nature. There's a lint thing going on there.
Yeah,
we'll get to what lint means in a second, because people are like,
yeah.
Lint? What's lint? So
You don't use lint rollers with code. It's not cloth.
Well, actually, you know what? Linting is a lot like using a lint roller on your code, isn't it? Though
it is.
It's so what linting does is it sort of checks to see whether or not your code has all the spaces in a way in which well, you know what? I've been talking a lot. Sarah, why don't you explain what linting is?
Yeah, so linting is a way to specify like rules for how your code should like look and almost and to a degree flow. There are linters that can also do this JSX-A11Y is an accessibility linter that kind of does analysis on the code, seeing if there's any clear-cut things that way this is not accessible, like you should be using this kind of technique to make it more accessible. But main when we say linting is usually for styling. So I'm using prettier for a main like core of the rules for how the code should look. So some things with that is like 2 spaces instead of 4. If I did this to 4 spaces, it would probably like have weird spacing or something awkward.
Yeah, and it's really hard to read if it's all like that.
Yeah, like this is like, I don't know where anything begins. Now, if I run linfix, hopefully this should catch it.
Yeah, it looks like it did.
It just reverted it back because it doesn't follow the rules we've set for how we want the code to look.
So that way we don't have to keep all those rules in our head at all times when we're working.
Nope, it's all automated, and we're also using recommended rules and guidelines. So we're following community expectations.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so that's linting. So when I ran npm run linfix, that's running the ESLint, which is the linting tool for JavaScript and front ends. We can add a lot of plugins to it. I described the JSX-A11Y and prettier. I have quite a few TypeScript ones to ensure maximum type safety and adherence to TypeScript rules and regulations, and just for React cleanliness as well.
Right. And that just means that, like, if you do all those things, it'll take care of a million things that could create bugs later on, or, various mistakes, because this gets complicated very quickly if you don't do stuff like that, right?
Yeah. And some maybe older projects, you'll need to have a ton of overrides to the TypeScript ones because you didn't follow it to a T. TypeScript rules as much as you could have, so you have to make it a little bit laxer. Since I'm starting up fresh, I could be 100% strict, and not.
Wow! Check this out. A Harvey2K in the chat says a computer scientist at Bell Labs came up with lint in 1978 while debugging the YACC grammar he was creating for C, and it was named after actual fabric, which is lint. Looks like it goes all the way back to the beginning of real computers with Bell Labs and the creation of C.
It's not a new concept.
And yet, so often, we don't have it on projects.
Yeah, it's like testing. A not as ubiquitous as it should be.
Yeah.
Do you want to start going to tests?
Yeah, yeah. Let's run the tests. Yeah, let's run that code and see how we're doing on our tests.
Yeah.
So this is running a bunch of
That,
automated tests, and it looks like we had a total of about 19 tests there that all pass.
we have 17 tests, 2 suites. So the only testing I did on this, due to this, like how simple this was really on the calculating, um, the calculations of what questions did you or what answers did you provide and what answers did you get. I ran a bunch of, create a bunch of tests that verified that when you actually respond to this, you're getting what I've intended you to get.
Oh yeah.
Or what, yeah. So like this is if you experience sexual attraction, you're not getting asexual,
right.
or the opposite.
Right.
That something isn't,
It's telling. This is making sure that when you click the buttons in that order, you get back an actual true answer, not garbage.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, the tests are pretty simple in terms of just verifying that certain answers give you that corresponding sexuality, but they just test the basic assumptions of the calculate function. So the calculate function is a lot of conditionals.
Oh dear, that's a lot of conditionals.
Yeah.
But we can break our tests pretty easily just to prove that they're working, right? Let's try and make it so that something that's very obviously wrong can be.
Yeah.
So we just changed yes to no.
Should get, yep, 10 failed.
Whoa. Yeah, the test
Big
suite
warning sign.
Man, that test suite attacked you for doing that.
Like, nope. This is like the core breakpoint. Are you falling under some form of asexual spectrum or not? So if we mess with that, everything else kind of breaks as a result.
Right.
Now, if we break something, maybe we just take away these 2 clauses, might be like only 1 or 2 test failures.
Yeah. Of course, the way that you've designed, yeah, I see that. There's only 2 failures there. Of course, that means that like the way you've designed the system, in order for it to be able to calculate, it needs to ask those questions in a specific order. You can't mix and match, right?
Correct. So you have kind of 3 pathways here.
Yeah.
You have to answer all the questions in that pathway. I thought about breaking it out so it wasn't like 3 different streams, but I felt like it was like more overloading if you had all of them at once, and especially if they didn't apply.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, yeah, so it's like a lot of back and forth here.
But because of the fact that you did that, it means that now when you click on one, it automatically shows you the questions that are relevant to you directly afterwards, and you can even sort of look ahead a little bit to see if this is really for you because of that. But you will not be able to redesign your questionnaire to not put the most important questions first. But then again, they are definitely the most important questions, so you shouldn't need to code it in a way where you can mix and match.
Yeah, you have to answer this question, otherwise we can't determine anything anyway.
Yeah.
At least you can answer sometimes. The fallback. Yeah, so the questions have like their 3 different.
Wait, does that mean that do you experience physical sexual attraction? It means that your answers are no, never, sometimes, or yes means always. I am always experiencing physical attraction.
Probably the wording could be better. It should probably be like a qualified yes. Yes with an asterisk on it. And the asterisks are the questions you answer. It was like, I was really awkward, like trying to figure out, because with gray asexuality, it's not no, but it isn't yes either.
Right.
Like, how do we, sometimes was the term I came up with. I feel like it's like depends
Yeah,
or stars are aligned or so. I don't know what the best way to phrase that was. That's why it was
yeah.
an interesting like
It's
thought experiment.
yeah. It's like um, maybe it's more like, can you be sexually attracted just by just without really getting to know someone deeply, for example. Maybe that's more what you're trying to get at. But that might be a specific thing rather than the
Yeah.
generalized thing. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, but that's a UI thing. Hmm.
UI is really important, and it was like this is like probably like who cares about like the logic? You have to make sure the user understands it to the logic. They can even approach the logic and understands intent.
Yeah. So when this gets to a point, actually, is that a lot of times, like someone who's using software gets frustrated with with the software and not able to use it, and a lot of times they will blame themselves for being dumb because they don't know how to use the software. When in fact, somebody designed that software poorly.
Yeah. Um, all of your best intention was designing it. You have to really think of who is going to be using this. Can they understand it? Does it follow basic conventions? Like if you like buttons are a common web interface design theme. We know that we should click on it,
Mm-hmm.
or we know what a link is. If we're not following those conventions, people won't understand how to use it. Um, like big text is headings. We
Yeah.
can't like flip everything on its head to be unique. We have to follow the standards. Otherwise, people are gonna be confused.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm
All
just
right.
playing with the questions now. There you
Yeah.
go.
All right, so we've got a few more minutes. Is there something small we can do to this code? Oh, well, actually, you know what? Let's talk a little bit about this big, huge conditional right here. Let's talk about what a conditional is, because that's a concept that like every programming language pretty much has some sort of conditional. So let's walk through what this giant conditional right here is.
Yeah. So this calculate function is taking the answer. So when you hit submit, let's go sometimes. Um, and let's say yes. So when we hit submit, we're taking the answers we have, submitted here,
Mm-hmm.
and feeding it to this function. So it's looking at your answers for like the top level question. Do you experience physical sexual attraction? And it's testing to see if that's yes. So if that's yes, then it executes everything under this. Then it has, nested conditionals
Right.
underneath it.
There's a conditional inside of the conditional.
Yeah, like test through all of these different sub questions that went along with it.
Right.
Um, Now on this top level, if we have an else if, basically, okay, if you didn't put yes, you put sometimes. So if you do sometimes, then execute these conditionals. Now, if you didn't put yes or sometimes, you put no. So we could have done it like else if, yes, no, no,
Yeah.
but there's no other options for you.
Right.
There's only three options: yes, sometimes, and no. So we can just put else, like all other cases, which in this case is just no.
Right.
This is the asexual conditional code block.
And I'm noticing that is that a custom method that you have called and if yes?
Yeah, add if yes. So I know it's like a lot of repetition of just testing if if you have this answer as yes, then add it to your possible results list. So it's made a helper function that just tests if the answer has been responded to with yes, and then add it to your results array. So takes basically extracting out these through repetitious lines, making this a lot cleaner to look at.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd have all of these ifs,
So it's
going on.
it's adding these things to an array too. That's another concept also. Maybe we should go over what an array is.
We could call an array, or just call it a list, and the list kind of describes it.
Yeah. So it's just a list of stuff, and that's a data type, right?
Yeah, so the TypeScript notation for that type would be the type, which is sexuality, because that's a specific thing type of data that I've constructed.
Yeah.
Um, and we have these empty brackets, which I guess
Yeah.
is a list of it.
So basically, what we're constructing here is a bunch of sexualities, but also TypeScript says it's only sexualities. It's not anything else, right?
Yeah, if we put like 4 here, it's probably gonna,
Yep.
yep. So this
Type
is
number.
the, yeah, because I added a 4 here.
Yeah, type number
Um,
not assignable to type sexuality. So it's claiming that like, hey, that's a number. That's not a sexuality. Yeah.
we added like foobar. It'll probably say this foobar is not assignable to type sexuality. So we can't just put, anything we want in here. We got to put things in the sexuality type. Now, if we put, you know, we always start off with pansexual for whatever reason. That's going to compile, but it's not going to make any sense because yada, 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 yada.
Submit. Oh,
Yeah,
you,
like,
uh, you always could be pansexual, is what you're saying when you write it that way.
yeah, I guess we could always add all of them. Just cover all the bases. The quiz is not, but it's going to give you all the options. You could be everything. Only you can decide.
Um, yeah, but when you did that, I bet your test suite will fail, even if if your types are still coming back as good, right?
Yeah, because it should not be having pansexual in a lot of these answers. So I'm going to expect a lot of red. Red.
Yep. Good. Okay, that proves that we didn't. The system is designed to be in one particular way, and you can't accidentally fat finger something and stick something in there, or design changes in the code need to be intentional, and the tests help you keep them intentional, just like the type safety and the linting do as well.
Yeah, just it keeps you everything in order.
Yeah. Cool. Is this the kind of project that you would want any help on?
Yeah, if people have suggestions or like new additions to the sexualities or like new ideas, I'm totally open to help from the world.
Okay, cool. So let's point them back at GitHub and sort of walk them through like what they would need to do to help you out. And is this for like, would you like somebody if somebody is going to try and help? What would a good beginner thing be for them to maybe try and help out on?
Maybe take a stab at the verbiage on some of these questions if you're more user interface design inclined, like figure out the language. If you're more interested in like web design, you could try to clean up like maybe the colors, maybe make a better interface for the questions. Maybe borderless is better. Otherwise, there's also bigger initiatives of like adding completely different calculator for like gender identity, like the big ones.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that would, yeah. So they could maybe raise an issue if they've got something that's like a design thing that like, hey, I think this would be better. Or they might try submitting a pull request or something like that as well, right?
Yeah. Maybe I could make my own issue here too.
Okay.
Or you could. So you issues in GitHub are basically say it's an issue with this project.
Right. And this is open to everybody, right? This is like, yeah, as long as you're not, as long as you're nice and you're trying to be constructive, you are very welcome to open issues or even change some code and submit a pull request for the changes that you'd like to see added to the project.
Yeah, it's if you want to fork it and then make pull request from your fork, your version of it, you're welcome to.
Cool.
If you have a GitHub account, you can just make an issue, and maybe someone else will make a pull request.
Yeah.
Someone else can be inspired.
Or you can just use that to track your own thing that you want to do and start off with your issue, say what you intend to do, then say, oh, I've got this. Let me go ahead and fork it, and I'll start making something. So that way everyone knows what it is you're working on. Yeah. So that way no one else is changing the thing that you're trying to change also. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the value of open source also, is that you know, you can get many eyes on the code. But this is really cool.
It's not a big or super complicated code base, but it has a focused goal and aim.
Right. Yeah. Um, let's see here. All right, here's something that could change a lot. What if we added a slider instead of a yes or no radio button? So that's not quite as yeah, that might change a lot of things on the inside of the code because you can't use yes or no anymore. So like this whole thing of calculate would need to be redone, right?
Well, so if we have a slider, we'd probably have like the hard yes range, which we'd probably ascribe to like allosexuality, have like a middle, like gray. We still have breakpoints. It just wouldn't be yes, no. Sometimes like it's gonna be like a percentage
Mm-hmm.
slider or some range, and we're deciding what ranges equal what. That'd be cool.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Um, so, yeah, no, all ideas are ones that we can continue use. I mean, it's not like only certain people are the privileged few who get to touch the code, and everyone else has to submit to what that code is. Everyone should have a say in what code should be. So, yeah. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our time. I think at this point, if you unshare your screen, we'll sort of get into the big window phase of things. What did we learn today? I think we learned a lot. But how about you, Sarah? What came up to you as something that you noticed today?
We learned about CSS, style components, how to use like a developer console to make changes on your web page on your computer.
Yeah.
Talked about conditional logic and testing it.
Yeah. And let me also ask you a few basic questions. First of all, what was like your first coding experience, and what really drove you to do this as a career?
I think probably the real answer for that, like the nice answer, oh, it's programming class. No, the real answer is like video game modding.
Oh, yeah?
Or feeble attempts at video game modding. There were, minor scripting experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what drove me to want to learn more about development and programming. That's what made me take like high school classes on it. Was trying to, how can I use this to get better at video game modding?
Yeah.
Then it turned into a career.
Yeah, for me, it started with trying to. I was watching Will Wheaton play Dungeons and Dragons, and he kept rolling low numbers, and I was like, that poor man, he must have a condition. I'm going to try to write a data analysis tool that's going to be able to figure out what it is that's causing him to always roll low numbers. And so I started there and started creating these giant conditional statements too, like that. So that's really cool. Yeah, you can you start by scratching your own itch, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you start from a place of like what you're passionate about, then you get more passionate about the industry ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody wanted to start to learn programming, let me ask you, what do you think the most important thing to remember about being a programmer is?
Ooh, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
I think it's always collaboration. You don't code in a vacuum. I think that's probably the most important thing to remember is you're on the shoulders of giants always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're working with a team. You're writing together. You're helping each other and helping future yourself work. Yeah, that's fair. All right. So if someone wanted to get started with programming, where would you have what do you think would be the best idea for where to start?
Yeah. I thought Python was a pretty good introduction to like scripting. But I think probably more of like an immediate, like instant gratification is probably just learning how to make little simple web pages with maybe some like JavaScript elements. That probably feels very um, gratifying to have like a web page up that you built.
Yeah, yeah, I
Um,
can see that. So you could try just building a simple web page and start with the most bare bones, like 1990s styled web page you can think of.
or you could get fancy and try setting up a static site generator like Jekyll.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then you can use GitHub Pages and have it be actually be published. Um,
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah. Okay, so just because it sounds like it's complicated doesn't mean that you have to, you don't, you should stay out, is what you're saying, right?
Everything sounds complicated first, but then you start reading it, and then like a few weeks here later, it's like that's old hat now.
Cool. I think that pretty much wraps up our show. I want to thank Sarah Sunday for being here today. This has been marvelous to look through React and TypeScript and to learn about CSS, Git, and a whole slew of things. Yeah, the intention behind this is to let you know, viewer, that you can code as well. And that we also need more people to code and more people who have different points of view. You get the same group of people from San Francisco always coding, the same group of people from St. Petersburg always coding. You'll get only one kind of app. But we're going to need more than one kind of app if we're going to live in a world of software, which we're already living. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Next week, we'll have another guest and another mentor and a different code base, and we'll learn some more about software. Thanks, everybody.